figured it's after Sukkot, it's time to start some new topics. And clearly this class has snowballed or avalanched into not so much this idea on relationships, we might get back to, I'm sure, at some point, but just different events that go on in the Jewish life cycle, Jewish thought, Jewish philosophy. And what I'm appreciating the most from this group is the freshness of opinions that exists here, the difference of opinion that exists here, and the fact that we managed to bring out new ideas with old ideas, the bringing up new subjects. And I'm not a very consistent person when it comes to learning. To other things, yes, it drives my wife crazy. I always drive in this lane because that's the way I drive in this street, and who cares if it's the slowest lane? But that's what I do. When it comes to learning Torah, though, I'm like all over the place. I like to dabble here, dabble there, dabble in a third place, and it made for learning in yeshiva very difficult, because when they tell you for the next 6 months you're going to study this one page of Talmud, that was like a death sentence for me. Like, what do you mean this page of Talmud? And I realized in the back of the Talmud there's all kind of little books and commentaries and things, and I found myself studying more of that than the rest of everything. But Baruch Hashem, my biggest passion when it comes to halakha, you might think is kosher, but not really. That's not the first thing I went to study when I went to yeshiva. I actually studied to do chuppah v'kiddushin, to do marriages, wedding ceremonies, before I studied anything else. I thought, listen, I want to get my first certificate very quickly. So how much can you know about a marriage? One night, they told me that rabbis don't even study it. You just take the Art Scroll book and it has it in Hebrew and English, and you read it and you say Baruch Atah Hashem, and you give a ring. Is it worth this much? And then 2 witnesses, and the rest you buy a ketubah online. The rest is come on, American Judaism in a nutshell. And I was blown away to realize that it took me 6 months to study, but in order to study it in 6 months, it's funny. In order to study it in 6 months, I had to cancel everything else that I was learning. I quit my job that I was working at. I was learning full time with my chavruta Josh, who was a rabbi today, and 6 months from 7 o'clock in the morning till about 11:30 at night. We had a lunch break and a dinner break for an hour. And I realized, well, chuppah v'kiddushin, marriage is a big deal. It's a big thing in Judaism, and it's not just a ceremony. Not what meets the eye is what you get. And I slowly, putting on a show. I slowly realized we're a very child-friendly class. You see, this is Baruch Hashem. Rosh Shlomo Carlebach in his synagogue, and he always encouraged the ladies to bring their babies to tefillah. And when they would cry and someone would go shh, he would throw the person who said shh out of the synagogue. He said they also are allowed to pray, babies. They also can cry. We crying, they're crying, different tunes, different sounds, but let the babies do what they need to do. Baruch Hashem. They didn't know about the babies who tried to give a class. That was a different story.
It's coming.
Or babies that take over the class.
No, that's entirely the fault of the viewers. Nothing to do with the baby.
But when the babies are that cute.
Okay, that's his mom's problem, not mine. So, when it comes to this whole study, this learning of Judaism, of marriage, of what does it mean to be married, what happens at the chuppah, we can move down. I'm not that religious, so if you'd like to move down, you're welcome to. You could bring a chair over here. Whatever. Feel at home. How many of you have been to a Jewish wedding before? How many have not? How many of you have been to an Orthodox Jewish wedding before? Yeah, an Orthodox Jewish wedding. Tamar, you've never been?
I've been to one.
She just paid for one. What do you mean she's been there? She's still paying for one. I'm going to ask you a few questions. See if we know the answers to them. What does a chuppah look like?
Thank you.
It's
A canopy.
sometimes it's a talus.
A talus? How does a talus look?
The talus has just got
Marlene,
the
bring it,
stripes on
Marlene.
both sides.
Oh, we will.
It's got the stripes on both sides.
Straps on both sides?
Yes.
And how does it held?
It's held with sticks.
With sticks, right? With the poles.
Or with people.
Or with people. People listen above.
We're getting ready for this, so I'm listening.
Okay, you're listening. Listen. This class is dedicated to you.
We are talking about using talesing.
Okay, so here, talitot. Very good. So,
One or two? Is there a minimum?
no, I don't think
Minimum
so.
would be
I don't know.
one,
I didn't know there was more than one.
Well,
I have to
in
tie them
Beth
together?
We
How do you-
have the best for Alin Arim. We have one that is probably quadruple.
Really?
It's one with that.
Is it one talit or it's like?
But it looks like one, but it's like sewn together.
Wow. Okay.
It's for all the kids.
Normally it's
May all the Beit HaKnesset have that many kids to put under a talit.
Amen.
Okay, give me a few examples of wedding songs that you've heard of before. Wedding songs that you sing under the chuppah.
Songs from the Shabbat.
Songs from Shaar. Oh, di shama, or oh, di shama. Okay, Eshet Chayil, that's already pretty out of the box. Eshet Chayil, I sang that at my wedding. Nobody knew what was going on. Yeah. Okay, Dalet Bavas. I walked down to the chuppah with the Dalet Bavas. That was my choice for the chuppah. That's a song that the Chabad circles they only sing a few times a year. It's a song that you don't sing so much. Yeah. Any other wedding songs you know? Sameach te Samach. Sameach te Samach. What?
Yes.
Baruch haba or Brucha haba, depending who's walking down. You ever heard of the song Ma Kehillat Am?
No.
Ma Kehillat Am Barechu El.
No.
Okay. Have you ever heard of the song Yismach Hatani? Okay, some of you heard. Yismach Hatani Bikal Emuna. You heard of that?
That is
Ever heard of Et Dodim Kala?
Which one?
Et Dodim Kala Boi Negani. All right. Some of you are looking at me like Jewish songs.
It's also Sephardi. Great, but
Ever been to a chuppah where the chuppah is not on poles, or it's not made out of velvet, or it's just a talit sitting on two people's head?
In a picture.
In a picture.
I've seen it.
Okay, I'm asking these questions for a reason.
I've seen under talit and then he's with the talit with her.
Very good.
Wrapped up together.
What is the chatan and kala? What does the chatan give the kala under the chuppah?
The ring.
The ring.
And they have the one.
A ketubah. Right. What?
Ketubah.
What kind of ring?
Gold. Plain gold bag.
Gold, round.
Round.
Okay, so none of you are Kabbalists because the Kabbalah says you need a square ring with a circle inside. Yeah. Okay, very good. In Yemenite and Syrian communities, till today, the custom is to give a coin
Yes.
under the chuppah. Sometimes a gold coin. So I hope not a quarter or something, but sometimes some kind of
I thought
coin.
it had to be gold.
Oh, so we'll get to that in just a little bit. What other customs? What happens on the day of the wedding? You know, before the wedding. What is that day all
They
about?
both fast.
Both fasting?
They don't see each other. And they don't see each other.
And they
for a
don't see
week.
each other. Very good. For a week beforehand?
Yes.
Right?
It's a minhag.
Yeah. Painfully had to keep. I compromised. We did like 4 days. But my in-laws couldn't know.
And we still can't tell them.
Fasting.
Yeah, they fast from
Actually, our custom is to have a big meal on the day of the wedding.
When?
Before the wedding.
Oh, before the wedding.
You had to see
The night before the wedding too.
so that you could do that.
Actually, that's what my kids did.
What time of day do weddings happen?
Normally in
More or
the
less
evening.
anytime.
When
More or
the
less
sun
any
goes
time.
down.
Normally at the evening. Sunsets are a big deal.
Sunset.
I don't know if you're familiar. What day of the week do weddings normally happen on?
Should be a Monday or Thursday.
Sunday.
Something about Tuesday.
Tuesday is a big number I'm hearing. Tuesday or Monday night.
Yes.
According to the Ramah, that's Pamayim Kitov. It's the
Yes.
double Kitov, whatever that would mean. And
In Israel, it's customary a lot now, Friday lunchtime.
Friday. So there's a book from Morocco where he says that they never heard of a chuppah that didn't happen on a Friday. Every chuppah happened on a Friday. Actually, in Ashkenaz, when I was by the Kehillat Rebbe, he said in Hungary, they got married like 10 minutes before Shabbat. And to save money, the Friday night dinner was the wedding dinner.
That's very clever.
People didn't have that much money to go around.
Idea.
Yeah, because we had this discussion. What do you do if in a situation where parents don't want to plan a wedding? So I said, just do Friday night dinner. I said, what does that mean? I said, what about the dancing? He said, dance. And you can have music. I don't know if you're familiar that there is a rabbi in Ashkenaz, I believe his name was the Maharil, Rabbi Luria, who says that you have to bring non-Jewish musicians to a wedding that happens on Shabbat, because the mitzvah of having music at a wedding is more important than the prohibition of not telling a non-Jew to play music. Now, if I would do that today, do you know what would be said about me? But this is brought down, it's about at least 1,000 years old, that source. It's a Jewish, authentic Jewish. Now, obviously, they have rabbis on the other spectrum. Like, are you crazy? Music on Shabbat? What else?
Actually, not in all, but there's in many synagogues here in San Diego that play music all the time.
Okay.
Not
I don't know, not in our circles, Avril. In North Africa, very often the custom was to get married on a Wednesday morning. The groom would go pray in the synagogue of the bride's father. He would come dressed up in flowers on his head, and everyone would be wearing flowers, like crowns of flowers, and they would dance them in the morning. The whole community would come to wake him up in the morning, take him to the synagogue. They would come there. They would hold candles and bowls of milk. Don't ask me about the milk, guys. And they would walk to the Kala's house, a letter from Rabbi Yosef Mashash, and he says they would walk to the Kala's house, and the Chatan would just come stand next to the Kala. They would put a talit on top of each other. The rabbi would say a blessing, and they would have a wedding that lasted for 7 days.
Oh, wow.
People just left to take naps. That was how that went.
That's how the Indians do it.
Yes?
No, seriously. That's an Indian wedding.
Great. I just told you about a Morocco wedding, but I'm sure in India they do the same thing.
I mean, from India. That's Hindu weddings. Yeah, they get a phone call on a Monday to say you're going to be home on a Friday. We've got your wife there. That's exactly how they do it. It's interesting. Many people like that.
Because of economic calculation, now they don't put talit until they get married.
Very good. That was also a question. When do you start wearing your talit? And I think that actually might be in the article we're learning. I'm not sure. Where do you do a wedding? What's the best location for a wedding?
Outside. It has to be outside.
It has to be outside under the star.
Yes. Even when it's snowing, they do it outside.
Actually, the best place to do a wedding is inside of a synagogue.
Yeah.
If you look in old Sephardic traditions, there's many halachot about what happens when you open up the ark during the chuppah ceremony. Do the Torah stay in? Do the Torahs come out? You're talking about a wedding. Actually, in Europe, they stopped doing chuppot inside of synagogues because of the lack of modesty or the lack of respect that was taking place in the synagogue. And therefore, rabbis said this wedding has to be outside of the synagogue. And then they came up with all kinds of ideas. Why outside? Why under the sky? Why under the stars? But that was a takana, a decree. My reason, yeah?
There were lots of weddings in the shul, and after the shul, there is the ceremony. And
Very good, because you're not allowed to eat inside of a shul, technically. You have to go, especially if you're going to do like a real formal dinner, it can't be inside of the synagogue. And therefore the halacha is that you would get married inside and then everyone goes outside. Which, have you ever been to like a real synagogue? I'm saying real meaning like in New York, like from the 1800s. They always had a social hall attached to the synagogue, but they have these huge sanctuaries. So why didn't they just take apart the sanctuary and put in chairs? Because they knew that you couldn't have such a dinner inside of a synagogue. So if you were going to have a synagogue that could house 300 people, you better have a social hall that can house 300 people as well. And if I'm not mistaken, almost every synagogue you know that's older than an office space inside the Sprouts, but old synagogues, even Bet Jacob is an example of this, right?
But
Then
the social hall is separate from the
Yes.
A lot
right.
of places they're attached.
No,
okay.
Chabad is attached.
By the way, the idea of being attached is a very simple. It's a recent invention. The reason, you know, the reason for that?
So they can be bigger for the...
In case there's an overflow on the high holidays, so we kill two birds with one stone. It's a smart idea, just not a traditional idea. How many weddings have you been to before in your life? Throw me numbers. At least.
Oh,
At least 50?
maybe more.
100?
Yeah.
Have you ever been to a wedding where one of the people at the wedding was Sephardic?
No. Yes, actually.
Oh, one
My
or two.
daughter.
I mean, one.
One, just one, even
Yeah,
one. It
one.
doesn't have to be two.
Yes.
My
My
sister.
daughter married this bird.
Yeah, but when you ask this question, you have to take into account that the same way Yemenite people give rings today, even Sephardic custom changed. Like
Okay, no, sure. But this whole discussion is just...
say that if you were a Sephardic or one of the people were Sephardic doesn't mean that it was like Sephardic, purely Sephardic custom.
Oh, you're right. So what I'm saying is though that in 2015, We've been. Are we still 2015? Yeah.
Yes.
We've been to 50 weddings, and we're very familiar with one style of wedding, or maybe two. If you know slightly the differences and nuances between a Chabad wedding and an Ashkenazi wedding, you might be familiar with two styles of weddings. Some of you might think it's the same. But there are 3, 4, 5, 6. I have the back of this book has like 12 different customs from Syria, from Lebanon, from Germany, from France, from Russia, from all kinds of places that had wedding customs. And the beautiful thing about a wedding is there's no right and wrong about how you do a wedding. There are certain things that have to be done. Ketubah must be done. The giving of something, ring, coin, something has to be done. And living together afterwards must be accomplished, right? Like certain things have to happen at the wedding. And the 2 witnesses have to be kosher witnesses. There's 7 brachot. All the Jewish communities share these same customs. Where we differ are nuances, customs, ideas, significance that is put onto certain issues. And for me, when it comes to a wedding, I'll tell you a beautiful story. My wife, someone once asked the stolen her Rebbe. So what is the stolen custom? To do this at the wedding, like the in-laws want, or to do this at the wedding, like those in-laws want? I said, our custom is not to fight at the wedding. That was the answer. That's our custom. And I tell this to every couple that I marry off. You know, like I'm doing a wedding now, Sum Zal of a Persian Bukharian family, both very rooted in their traditions. And already come to like, so do we do this or do we do that? And my answer is always, you could do both. I'm always happy to do both. So the wedding will take twice as long. Who cares? Yeah? Or you could do neither. But you have to make sure that what you do makes as many people happy as you can, because the point is not to fight under the wedding. Too many times you have celebrations that happen. Someone sent me a video about 6 months ago from a Brit in Israel, where they named the son, and the girl's family wanted a different name for the baby, and the boy's family liked this name, and they started fighting with each other as the mohel named the Brit. The wife starts throwing things at the husband. The in-laws are pulling each other to the floor. And I said, this is crazy. At a Brit, that's what's going to happen? So he named him Moshe instead of Yaakov. Who cares? So make another kid. Whether you have a problem, you'll have another one. What? But there are certain things that are not worth fighting over. These customs, there's no right or wrong about these customs. When I studied Jewish tradition, we know the halachot. The question is, the customs that developed, why did they develop that way? What's the idea behind them? It can't be that in Europe or in a Sephardic country, they both had 2 different customs and they were meaningless. They must have a reason. They must have a significance. They must have been born out of either a religious need or a societal need or a philosophical need, or something led to the birth of that custom. And I read a beautiful article this last week by a rabbi, a Persian rabbi from New York, Rabbi Yonatan Halevy. I don't know him. I don't know of him. I don't know much about, if I would tell you to read the rest of his articles. But this one was very well written. And I figured, we talk so much about weddings here, about ketubot, about the chief rabbinate, about all kinds of things. Let's talk about the nice side of weddings for a little bit, Baruch Hashem. And to really understand, next time you're at a wedding, I guarantee you that after you learn this together with us, you will have a completely different experience at the next wedding that you go to. So with your permission, let's do it. I think you take the first 7 pages in each packet.
I can do the packages.
Okay, perfect. Take the top 7 papers. It has 14 pages, 7 papers a person. And I think I might have 10, so I don't know how many we are. Don't want kind of cheese? No? And cereal? Don't say? Yum. Yummy.
That's it. Yes, I'm separating.
Does he separate?
She's counting him out, and I'm sending him. Tell us when to stop.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהכל נהיה בו.
You have more there?
Oh, do you have more there? Yeah.
This is for who? This is for me? For you. And what about you? We're sharing.
She's sharing with both of us.
These are the
That's
3
not
quarts.
enough. Sharing is good.
Everyone have, or at least the person next to you has?
Oh,
Okay. The title of the article is very inspiring. That was sarcastic. Comparative study of the Sephardic and Ashkenazic wedding ceremony. It's written by Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, senior rabbi of Great Neck's Iranian Jewish Center, Bet Hadassah Synagogue. And I think that comparative study is a nice word. It is, we're comparing and contrasting the different customs. And as you go to weddings today, you'll realize something very beautiful. Very rarely do you find an same ethnicity or same customs or same traditions on both sides of a wedding ceremony. Very, very often today. And as we keep going into the future, you'll find more and more often, you'll find two different people, two different traditions, two different families, two different backgrounds, maybe two different languages even, that are getting married and Baruch Hashem are leading very, very successful marriages. Not just Ashkenazi and Sephardic. Used to be even in the Ashkenazi community, Polish people didn't marry Hungarian people, and Russian people didn't marry Lithuanian people, and even though that's maybe far behind, in certain religious communities, you won't find a Hasidic person marrying a Lithuanian person, or a modern Orthodox person marrying an ultra-Orthodox person, all kinds of beautiful things that are, Baruch Hashem, changing in the world. And as that happens, more and more customs are becoming fused together, and more couples are open to picking up traditions that aren't theirs, which is an interesting discussion. Like, why would you pick up a tradition that's not yours? But let's say you're at a wedding ceremony and you saw something that you really liked. So why wouldn't you incorporate that into your wedding if you had a chance? Unless the rabbi says, listen, there's a problem with that tradition. But you're seeing, and I'm seeing more and more people having a nice, it's like a cholent of customs at their wedding. In a good way, cholent, not in a bad way.
The chocolate is always good.
thank you.
That's how you know you're Jewish, then. That's. I'll read the first paragraph. I recently attended the wedding of a young couple. They were both raised in a strong Orthodox Sephardic community, yet religiously influenced by Chabad and Breslov. Both are Hasidic groups. Chabad being the movement started by Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a student of the Maggid of Mezrich, who was a student of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Chassidut. Breslov being started by the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov had a daughter named, anybody know?
Bina.
Maybe. I don't know if you-
Nachman?
Yeah, Rabbi Nachman had a mother named Fega. Fega was the daughter of Odel, I don't know how you pronounce the name. Odel was actually taught by her father how to write Kabbalistic amulets. That was what she was trained from a young age by the Baal Shem Tov. And most people don't know that about her. And she had a daughter called Fega, Fegele the Neviesa, they used to call her. Fega the prophetess. She used to have Ruach HaKodesh. And she raised Rabbi Nachman, and that's why, because of her spiritual connection to him, he actually insisted being called Rabbi Nachman ben Fega, not after his father's name. He said his father brought him into the world, but his mother was the one who brought him to the next world. And he very much insisted being called by his mother's name. So both of these are very old Hasidic dynasties, and if you would compare them, they're incomparable with each other. They are two polar ends of the spectrum. It's funny to me that very often people get attracted to one and then the other. They don't have much to do with each other. They're two very passionate Hasidiyot compared to other Hasidiyot that are pretty mellow, nothing exciting about them. Both Chabad and Breslov have very exciting feelings to them. They're very warm, very on fire, very passionate, very well written, a lot of literature in both of those Hasidiyot, unlike many other Hasidiyot, and they're very approachable. People from the outside very often will find themselves joining Chabad or joining Breslov because of the certain refreshing philosophies that both of them share. So, the Sephardic couple that was raised in Orthodox Sephardic community that were influenced by their rabbis or teachers who were Chabad and Breslov. Their heroic attempt at creating a ceremony that was true to their Sephardic heritage and reflected the Ashkenazic Hasidic traditions of their rabbis inspired the writings of this essay. What struck me as I watched the various parts of the wedding ceremony unfold were the contrasting ambiances, tones, and qualities stirred by the conflicting cultural backgrounds of the diverse minhagim exposed. So when we perform a wedding, you might think that, hey, listen, it's all customs, who cares? But very often you have one custom that is meant to invoke a certain feeling in the audience, and the other one is meant to bring out the exact opposite feeling. And if you're doing both of them together, so really you're shaking up worlds. But he says it was a heroic attempt and he admired that they were finding a way to fuse both their traditional home with their adult life learning. And we're going to read a little bit about those fusions and if they work and they don't work and what are they. Somebody want to read the next paragraph?
The research for this essay brought to light not only the substantial differences in the way Sephardic Jews and Ashkenazi Jews achieve community-sanctioned matrimony, but also uncovered the differences in halachic methodology and attitudes towards minhag, which requires a more in-depth study.
Let's pause here. This rabbi must clearly be an academic because of the way he writes and transliterates Hebrew. First off, I'm very wary when you write articles to use words that nobody else understands. But it's okay. In this sentence, there was not much that was not understood. But halachic with a K, you notice that? That's the way the Library of Congress transliterates the sound is KH, not CH like Jews do. CH is the sound for ch. So when someone comes and says, "Oh, is this Shabbat?" they're right. It should technically be transliterated as either KH or HA, H with a little dot or something to that effect. We Orthodox Jews tend to not care so much about the way it officially is transliterated. Also, certain words not being capitalized. For me, almost every word in Hebrew that's not part of the English text, in order to separate it from the rest of the text, I capitalize it. So minhag would have a capital M. I was thinking of going through and making those changes, but I figured I don't like to edit someone else's article. Just forgive me if some of the words are hard to read. They're written both in a very official academic transliteration as well as a Sephardic transliteration with a Sephardic accent, with a hayt, with an ayin, and you're going to see that brought out inside of the text. Keep reading.
The CH is like the German.
Yes.
So since Yiddish, I mean...
Oh, very good. You mean that's where it came from.
Very easily CH, but in English you pronounce differently.
Right, that's very nice. Okay, so that's probably where we got the CH from. Okay, imagine if you went and saw like challah, like KHLLAH.
Oh,
You think it's some kind of Russian food. You wouldn't know what it was.
European legalists spoke with the same, if not very similar, authoritative voice when codifying minhag.
Custom.
As they did when codifying halakha.
Which is law.
Whereas Sephardic authorities clearly distinguish between that which is halachic and essential to the ceremony, and that which is minhag and considered addressing to the ritual. This, of course, makes for a much greater amount of material originating in Ashkenazic sources, where codification response and texts dedicated to minhag really differentiate between the essential ritual, law, halakha, and that which is tradition, minhag.
This is a very important point.
Yeah.
You find much less literature about how a wedding takes place in Sephardic sources than you do inside of Ashkenazi sources. For the very simple reason that Ashkenazim codified, wrote down, put into law, all kinds of traditions and customs, and I'll tell you, even the truth when it comes to a synagogue. Which direction do you open up the curtain on the Aron Kodesh for? Which direction do you walk with the Torah scroll? Which way do you lift it? With which hand? Facing which direction? All kinds of rituals were put into the same books as law. Law just says, take it out of the ark. Law just says, lift it. I don't know how you lift it. The law says all kinds of, take 7 aliyot. It doesn't tell you how do you call him up to the Torah. That's not in the books of law. But in Ashkenaz, all of those things were fused into one. Both the law, both the custom, both the rituals, and there you'll find that you have a book in Chuppah and Kiddushin written by Rabbi Peretz, and you can find another book in Chuppah and Kiddushin that is 6 or 7 volumes long. For that reason, we're going to explore it together. Why? I don't know. I don't know to tell you. I can tell you just as an observation. By the Ashkenazim, tradition is very important. Rituals are very important. Don't get me wrong, by Sephardim, traditions are very important too. If you start to, like if you would go into my grandfather's synagogue and do like a Karlbach Friday night service, they would just leave. I mean, it's not like tradition, the way we sing, the way we read, but not to the point where it's uncompromising. For example, when the Jews came over from Europe to America, many groups of Jews insisted on dressing the same way they dressed when they were in Europe. To the point where if I would want to sign my son up to yeshiva and say, hey, I want him to come, but I don't want him to wear a suit. I want him to wear like a blue button-down shirt with a yellow tie, and khaki pants. A professional kid. He doesn't want. I don't want him to wear a black hat because they cost $300 and it's made out of a dead bunny rabbit, and I'm a vegetarian or whatever it would be. With that, they would tell me, sorry, but a yeshiva boy has to wear a black hat. He has to wear a suit. We don't find many Sephardic rabbis still wearing robes and turbans, or all kinds of fancy belts, or jewelry like the Bukharian rabbis used to wear, or such things. Because we didn't care so much about it. And if we came and people said, okay, rabbis wear suits now. Okay, rabbis wear suits now. And tomorrow they're going to tell us, rabbis wear sandals, so we'll wear sandals again like they were. For some reason, it wasn't so important to keep up these little details because they were seen as, oh, while we were in Iraq, that's what we did. We're not in Iraq anymore, so let's keep moving. Both sides have value. I very much value that Ashkenazim insist on their traditions. And you'll see that's why they're still alive after so many years. These traditions are still here. You'll find many Sephardic communities that they're like born again Sephardim. They're relearning traditions that they didn't know about when they were raised. And on the other hand, the uncompromisingness of giving up a tradition also leads to its own problems and separations. And both of them have pluses and both of them have minuses. I don't know why it is that way. It is that way. My grandparents, when they came from Yemen, refused to speak Arabic anymore. They don't want to. We're not Arabs. We don't want to speak Arabic. We're Israelis. We speak Hebrew. My wife's family still speaks Yiddish. My wife's mother's side of the family is in America for 7 generations.
Wow.
And they still speak Yiddish.
Do they speak English as well?
Sure. But it's not always as good as their Yiddish. Not always. My wife's family happens to be, yes, but not all the cousins are the same way. My father-in-law, who speaks Hebrew, English, and Yiddish, who was born in Israel, taught his children Yiddish, not Hebrew. Because Hebrew was just the language you spoke because we lived in Israel. It happens to be that most of his kids do speak Hebrew because they lived in Israel, but not necessarily because it was a value at home. And so that, for me, is interesting because I don't see it as a value to speak Arabic. Actually, today I would have liked to know Arabic. I'll tell you the truth. I would have liked to be able to understand what's being said on the streets and to figure out more and not have to have transliterations of who's trying to kill me. But I would appreciate knowing, but it wasn't a religious value. So for me to say, oh, Sephardic Jews, you're going to go to a Sephardic synagogue, the sermon must be in Arabic. Can you imagine? No. It just wasn't that important to us. So we're going to discover why these traditions, how they developed. But it's a good question what Tamar asked. Why did it develop that way? Why in these countries yes, those countries no?
If it was just Germany, I could understand it because just of the German character. But it's not just Germany.
Not just Germany.
It is.
But actually, Tamar, that's funny because the German Jews have the most unique Ashkenazi Jewish customs. I've studied them and I've prayed with them. They are also the least known Ashkenazi Jewish customs. And very often they're always compromising on their customs for what the Art Scroll says, or for what the Siddur says, or for what the Rabbi says. And very old Jewish customs that I'm sure none of you know about.
Could that something to do with the fact that of being their lives being threatened, their cultures being threatened, and there's a program called anti-Semitism, they call that probably very...
It could be. I would hate to blame a whole religious worldview on anti-Semitism, but it could be. Listen, there's a famous mashal that rabbis give us. How do you convince a person to change? What's the easiest way? By screaming at them, by being tough on them, or by warming them up to you?
Yes.
And the rabbis give a certain mashal, a parable. They say there was once the wind and the sun got into a fight. Who's going to be able to get this man to take off his coat walking down Governor Dre? And the wind says, I could do it. I'm so strong. I can make hurricanes, tornadoes. And the wind starts blowing and blowing. And as it blows, the guy holds on to his coat tighter. And it blows and starts buttoning it. And he ties it in. And the wind is not. Finally, the sun smiles. Says, you out of breath? So watch what I'm going to do. And the sun just comes out behind the clouds and shines on this poor guy in his black coat. And in 3 minutes, he takes his coat off. And the rabbis learn from here that you attract more flies with honey than you do. It could be that attitude of my wife and I were learning last night some text from Rabbi Yonatan Halevy, and we were saying that we're seeing how he experienced Shabbat was, he felt like he was the king of Spain. I don't know, he was writing fancy foods and apples on my table and wine in a silver goblet. It was a very different Shabbat feeling than I might think about in a ghetto somewhere in Russia. But it could be that It could be. I'm not convinced.
It's true during more anti-Semitism, more Jews tend to stick together.
But why it's a tradition specifically? We're not talking about law. I would imagine they all become more observant. But even foods, like bagels and cream cheese and lox is the national Jewish food. I would never eat bagels and cream chees and lox.
But that's American. It was not like nobody ate bagels and cream cheese and lox.
And you don't think so?
No, absolutely not.
Even not in Mexico.
Gefilte fish?
Gefilte fish, yes.
They feel
Hey.
fish, but not the way they eat it now.
I want to interject a little bit
Yes.
about the German approach. I don't have so much. My background is half German from my mom, so all I can tell you is, as when she was growing up, and she was growing up in the 30s, that there's some twists, a little bit of twist on. Hello, you want to go to that? Some twist on that from a child's perspective, because she was like around 8 or 10 years old, and so thinking about the Germans as being very orderly and having things written down, that's why I would just throw that out. But the idea of the assimilation was in Berlin, especially, which was a very cosmopolitan, very modern city. There was an attitude about being respectful to the Jews. This may not have been outside of in the country. They still were looking for horns, still looking for the Jewish horns. But in Berlin, there was a lot more respect, because my mother told me that when it was close to Pesach and Easter are always together. So the Germans used to make shelled Pesach Easter rabbits, so that Jewish kids
Could have kosher for Passover, Easter rabbits.
so that the Jewish kids could have those. So that's a reverse of assimilation. That's saying we respect you and we want your kids to have what our kids have, so we're going to make them for Pesach.
Or it's the first
The other way
Or-
Jew for Jesus organization that exists in the world.
But no, that's not how I
I know, I'm sure.
No.
I mean, it was out of willing to be accommodating.
Yeah, and I'm still saying being more respectful.
Respectful, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Don't try to shoot it down.
No, that's
So-
why the Jews assimilated. I mean,
That's true. That is why the Jews, they felt very much welcomed and at home in that society. All right, so the top right of page 1. Two examples of what we're saying. Who said about the ring, gold ring? Avril? Oh, so Avril, you read the next paragraph.
Take, for example, the use of a gold ring.
Maybe you'll do this with me once. And while you're looking, there's a few pages of sources. There are like 92 sources to this article, which is why I like this article, because it's not just fluff; it's real sourced material. Page 10. Keep your page along with page 10 side by side. That way you can look up the sources with us. Okay?
Hold on, I have to find page 10. Okay, I have it. Oh, but that's at the back of this one. Okay.
Okay, just turn it over.
Okay. I like that. Take, for example, the use of the gold ring band. Under the chuppah, the traditional wedding ceremony consists of 2 parts. Kruzim, Erusin, or Kiddushim, and Nesu'im. Originally, these 2 ceremonies were held as much as a year apart. Today, both of these ceremonies take place under the chuppah.
Okay, so let's pause here. There are 2 parts to this: Erusin, or Kiddushin, and the Nisu'in. We use those words. Those of you who speak Hebrew, your mind is ruined already, because you think Erusin is engagement, Nisu'in is marriage.
Yes.
Not precisely. Let's look at a note. We're not going to read all these notes, but some of them. This Avram Grossman argues there were 3 parts. Shidduchin, which was the first time they get... What happens in Hasidic communities when they make a shidduch? In not your community, but in some communities they make a tanaim. They get together on the day they make the shidduch. The couple decides to get married, or the people decide the couple will get married, and they sign a document, financial document. You'll pay for this much of the wedding, you'll buy an apartment, you'll pay for a car, you'll pay tuition, whatever it is that happens, and that's already signed before an engagement, before a wedding, before anything. Then there's Erusin or Kiddushin, and then there's Nisuin. But footnote number 2
is when they do the engagements, like in New York, where they break the plates and they make all the
So
arrangements.
today we make what you're thinking about is that would be like, I see every culture has a different word for it.
What do you call it?
The tish, like before the chuppah.
No, she's talking about like at the engagement party.
At the engagement party,
Annoying.
where they break the plate.
Yeah.
I don't
And they-
believe
and
Chabad
they
does
put
this.
the
I don't.
arrangement.
You do? Yeah? At the engagement?
At the engagement.
Really?
Absolutely. And they
Okay.
make all the
So now you have to know, in
arrangements
the Judaism of 2015, most of these things are done all on the same day of the wedding. Because Erusin, like we're going to read in footnote 2,
It's done
it,
twice,
You break a
actually.
plate.
It's done twice.
Yeah, but what?
you guys heard? You break a plate? What? Yeah, we don't have this custom of breaking a plate. They did it at my wedding, but
marriage when it doesn't work.
that's true. We break a lot of plates afterwards, but that's a different story. Now, wise words from Rav Peretz. Do you think breaking plates is a bad thing? Rav Peretz once told a groom in front of me, he said, when you guys get mad at each other, break every plate in the house. Break every piece of furniture in the house. But don't you dare say one bad thing to the other one. He said, because plates, you can buy new ones. He said, furniture, you can replace them. He said, but you can never take back one name that you called the other one.
That's exactly right.
And obviously neither of those are ideal scenarios, right? But he was telling something that most people don't think. Most people think, well, let's fight with words. That's not break things. No, break things, because you'll never be able to call back, or you call the other one. I had a couple. 15 years before, he had called her fat. And she, to this day, still remembers that he called her fat, and every time she looks in the mirror, and you know, she's right. How could you forget that the person you trust the most betrayed your trust by calling you a name which you find offensive? It was a problem. The note 2, Erusin is an interesting scenario, and the reason why it's interesting is because it meant something that today we don't really have in our culture, and so we do it at the wedding because we don't know how to deal with this. Let's look at footnote 2. There's no adequate English translation for the word Erusin. Dvarim speaks of a man who took a woman, aras isha, but did not marry her. Velo lekacha. Says a man went. No, that's not what it says. Lakach isha. He aras isha. He aras her. He. You would say engaged her, but it's not the word. But did not marry her. The arus and the arusa, the man and the woman, each have the status of a married individual, but not the status of a married couple. What does that mean?
That they can't marry anybody else.
It's like
Half a marriage.
They can't marry anybody
They cannot marry anybody else, but
each other.
they needed to have a get if they were going to separate with each other. They had to get divorced, but they were not allowed to touch each other.
But how don't
Oh,
you
they
say?
weren't.
No.
But there's certain rules that also in South Africa there was that even if you were engaged to get married, you both had to be tested to make sure that you didn't have certain diseases. Otherwise, they wouldn't allow you to marry.
Okay, but that's not part of. We still do that today, but it's not part of the Erusin. Erusin is like a quasi-marriage. It's more than a promise. It's a halachic marriage halfway. They would have to go to court and get divorced if they wanted to separate at that point. Which is why today most Jewish communities do the Erusin 10 minutes before they do the Nisuin. Because it's at the wedding. We do it at the wedding. Because you know what a mess would be if all the broken engagements and the broken promises and everyone be divorced and gets
Enough divorces, right?
Right.
The divorce.
Okay. Let's see. Erusin on page 1. Erusin. Someone else read this paragraph for me.
Page 1.
Erusin is introduced.
Erusin is introduced with a blessing over wine,
You know this. The rabbi holds a glass of wine.
and is completed after the groom places a ring that is at least worth a pruta, a coin of minimum value, on the bride's finger. This is not an act of acquisition as much as it is an act of separation or exclusivity. That's the term kiddushin. Rachel Biale
I don't know who this Rachel Biala is. Just quoted in the article.
that the fact that halakha rules the smallest coin ratifies opinion suggests that the amount of money is immaterial because the acquisition is symbolic.
She needed a very minimal worth. 6. In footnote 5, a pruta is approximately 1/40th of a gram of pure silver. It's not worth so much, but it cannot be worth less. It cannot be worth less than that. It has to be something of a basic value. Now, the word pruta is a very important rule in halachic literature. If you steal something from someone that is worth less than this amount, you are not biblically obligated to pay it back. In the times of Noach, which we're coming to this week, the rabbis tell us that people used to steal from each other, but always less than a pruta. So a little bit at a time, so they stole everything the other person had, but they were never guilty, because in a court of law, you couldn't persecute me for that. It was a negligible sum. A pruta has many instances where it comes up in halakha, the wedding being always, the rabbi says, is this worth a shaveh puta? Is this worth something? Does it have any value to it? Let's keep reading. Halachically, somebody?
Halachically, this can be accomplished by giving the bride anything of value and declaring that the exchange is for purposes of erusin. Ashkenazic sources streamline this ceremony and only permit using a simple gold band for the erusin, whereas Sephardic authorities point out that the use of a ring is a minhag, and a coin or anything of value may also be used to complete the erusin ceremony. The preferred choice for Sephardic Jews is either a ring, a coin, or a piece of jewelry.
So whereas you find that the Ashkenazim are insistent on a ring, you'll find that the Sephardim were not at all insistent on a ring. Now there are a few reasons to insist or not being insistent on the ring. The ring probably did not start off as a Jewish custom, if you had to guess. It probably started off from the people around us were giving rings, and so we picked up on a ring. There's a terrible custom that exists in the world today. That is, when people get engaged, they give each other rings.
Yep.
And because of rings, who invented this idea of an engagement ring? Do you know? Which jewelry company? Which jewelry company?
Jews.
It is their claim to fame.
Diamond jewelers.
It was Tiffany's. Tiffany's. I never once in my life saw a store that can sell you something this small that's worth more than your cars. They invented in the 1800s this idea of an engagement ring. Give her a ring. In Jewish literature, because a ring is very closely associated with marriage, it actually would be a problem to give a fiancé a ring in front of people that could even be considered a marriage. And if it breaks off, it's therefore our custom not to give rings to each other before the wedding actually happens.
Necklaces.
All kinds of things.
Necklaces.
Watches.
My wife wanted like a glass of water. That was her.
You got a prize. Are you kidding?
No, in California it's very expensive.
I'll tell you the truth. My wife, when we got married, you always give that simple band at the chuppah, and then you're supposed to give like a ring with a diamond on it or something. So I told Dvara, we were like, listen, I'm going to go get a ring. She said, I don't want a ring. No, tell me the kind of ring you're looking. She was in New York. I said, I really don't want a ring. The best you can do is if you get me like a fake ring. That way my parents think you got me a ring, but nobody else will. Everyone who needs to think will think, I don't want a ring. Okay, so that's when listen, my wife, she's honest with me. She tells me something, she means something. So when I went to go look for a ring, someone heard it. Rabbi, you're crazy. You're crazy. If every girl tells you she doesn't want a ring, she really doesn't want. She really wants. She's just telling you she doesn't want. She wants. Okay, so I went and I spent X amount of money on a ring, and I come to New York, we got married. Yichud room, I give her the ring. She said, I don't want it. So when you don't want it, they told me, said, don't take advice from other people. If I told you I don't want a ring, I don't want a ring. Point in fact, she doesn't wear the ring. So I wasted a significant sum of money on something that she didn't want. But this, her daughter will wear. Okay, good. I'll save my future son-in-law some money. Maybe he'll give us a discount at the wedding. Really? Okay.
He did not want a ring. He bought her a diamond ring.
I tell you, it makes me very happy to hear this story. What is more interesting? Tell me what is most interesting.
To make him happy on Shabbos.
What is most interesting? Well, you'll look at footnote 8. The Ashkenazi authorities permit the use of a coin only when there is no ring available. Meaning, the coin, which was the original mitzvah, became now a secondary to the ring, which was a custom. Now, the Zohar does mention something about the coin that is being given, or whatever is being given, should sit inside of a woman's hand and outside of her hand, because it represents Hashem filling the universe and being outside of the universe at the same time. And perhaps that is where the ring does come from, where it sits both outside of the hand and inside of the hand. But again, all these customs remind me of, you first draw you first throw the arrow and then you put the bullseye around it. And it's like, I'm not sure that that's the origin of the custom, but I am justifying this custom. And that's why most Faladim also do this. There is source, at least in Kabbalistic literature, for the concept of a ring. Not necessarily a ring, but something that could sit inside of the hand and outside of the hand at the same time. Let's read the bottom of page 1. What is most interesting?
What is most interesting is that European Jewry's halachic authorities view the use of a ring not only as quasi-legal stricture and as codified as such, but much ink is invested in the details of how the transfer of the ring takes place, why it's done this way, and why a ring is chosen as opposed to any other object of value. In other words, because this simple act of transfer is infused with legal, religious, and theological meaning, the detail becomes significant. The groom must take the ring in his right hand and place it on the bride's right forefinger. If the groom is left-handed, he must take the ring in his left hand.
Yeah.
Question, Rabbi, why the hand? Who is the hand coming into play with?
Very simple, and in Judaism, in almost every business transaction, something has to happen with the hands. You take something, you move something, you push something, you bring something.
So marriage become.
The word in the Torah is v'lekacha. He took her, and so the only way to accomplish taking would be. And by the way, in non-Jewish culture, they do the same thing. They just lift her over the.
Yes.
The reason for lifting the bride, it's because to take her. It's the same idea. It's a biblical connotation of that word. Actually, the real reason why non-Jews lift the bride over the threshold, do you know?
Why is it muddy?
There's a pagan superstition that if a bride trips on the way into the home, that it's bad luck for the rest of their life. And that's why they lift her over. That's whenever I see Jews doing it, it makes me very mad. It's, we're not pagans, we have a Torah, Baruch Hashem. Alright. The Zohar.
So you're saying that hugging can supersede other things?
Well, you're finding that the minhag now becomes like a big deal. Not only just a custom, but it's a custom. Which hand, when you do it, how you do it, where you do it, on which finger it goes. None of these details are mentioned in halakha.
But this all comes from.
I believe the giving of a ring on that finger. Let me just see.
I read a few things about why this, but
It's footnote 11. Someone tell me what footnote 11 is.
Rabbi Eliezer Warren.
Sefer HaRepair.
It's mentioned by mostly Ashkenazi poskim. This is done, by the way, when we give a ring. See, here's the thing. Now that you took a custom that's not yours, you took the custom of a ring from the Ashkenazim, we also follow through with the rules that the Ashkenazim put on the ring. You're not going to steal the custom and then not follow the details. So we take the custom with the details. My idea here is to show you just that there are customs and they developed over time, and to just see where they happen. The Zohar, let's read the Zohar.
The Zohar invoked as stating that the right hand represents love, while the left hand represents strength.
Someone tell me what that's referring to. Right and left in Kabbalah always mean chesed and gvura, right?
The ring is placed on the bride's forefinger because it is the seventh finger if you count the 5 fingers on the left hand and the 7 as a meaningful number in the wedding ceremony. These are but a sampling of the many permutations that symbolism and meaning of the gold ring band produced in Ashkenazi halachic sources.
Look at footnote 14. Because halachic and minhagim are always combined together. 14. See this book on weddings, Rav Peretz has halachot, and then in the back his section called minhagim. And it's after the appendix. Like it's after the additions that are put in the book. But that's not how it would be written in a different book.
For an entire
Footnote 14.
For an entire menu of the symbolism of each of the minhag and Ashkenazi wedding ceremonies, Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan, Wedding Cabinet.
It's about almost everyone recommends that a couple reads this book before they get married. It might be a great read, but it's full of traditions and not so much the halachot that go into these things. So we have the Zohar. So now the Zohar is invoked. What do you mean by invoked? The Zohar doesn't actually... It doesn't actually mention this. It doesn't talk about rings, right hand, left hand, but it's invoked, meaning, well, if we're already giving with hands, so which hand should we use? Well, the Zohar says this hand means chesed, and so on and so forth. Okay. Another legal matter. So that was example number 1. How the gold ring, which was not originally mentioned in any Jewish source, has today become almost the highlight of the Jewish wedding ceremony. The ring, the simple
And
band,
you can't have diamonds in it. It has to be solid.
all kinds of
gold, it has
rules
to be
that come
yellow
along
gold,
with it.
Has to be this. Yes.
So, Rabbi, what was the original thought when we read the Torah? Actually, people used to get married there before all the minhagim and halachot and, the different, people that came from different places around the world. What was the origin?
Our rabbis in Masechet Kiddushin, that's why we have Ariella back in San Diego. Our rabbis in Masechet Kiddushin start off the Mishnah, Haisha niknet b'shlosha drachim. Now niknet is a bad word because in modern Hebrew, niknet means to be purchased. And that's not the translation in Talmudic Hebrew or Mishnaic Hebrew. Niknet is the word kinyan also. It would be a kanyon, is like a shopping mall. It's not the terminology. All kinds of things are niknim. You acquire. It's an acquisition. How you bring someone into your domain. You were two single entities, and now you are bringing her into your world, into your life. You are making her mikudeshet. Mikudeshet means separated from everyone else. I mean, she's no longer just another person on the street, but now she's directly connected to you. To you. How did you accomplish this? So, like I mentioned, 6 months ago, we had this discussion. Forgive, I know there are a lot of ladies in the room. Forgive the terminology that we're borrowing. Our rabbis say, well, the word in kinyan, we're going to look at every other way in which something is acquired. You can legally acquire something in 3 different ways. Yeah? The 3 different ways are as follows. You can buy it. How do you buy it? With money. You transfer money and you acquire. But notice here, when you give the money to who?
The owner.
The owner of what you're buying.
Right, so this is why this is not a sale. When you go to the store, do you give money to the broccoli you buy at Sprouts?
No, you give money to the person that's at the desk.
Very good. You give money to the person who's selling you the broccoli, who owns the broccoli. When you buy, see, it's not the right word, because you're paying
For product.
your wife for what she's giving you. Meaning, it's not a sale of her.
It's all of our services?
It's, no. You're acquiring something, which is you're acquiring someone into your domain. It's not a sale. It's not a purchase. We're borrowing terms and applying them to a wedding. The second way you could acquire something?
Barter.
Sign a contract. Work something out on paper. That would be our definition of a Ketubah, where we agree on paper that we're going to be married to each other. The third way, simply to acquire something.
Just acquire it in good faith.
Just take it. According to Jewish law, if you, let's say, go to a car dealership and you buy a car, the car is not actually yours until you drive it.
Oh, yeah.
It's not. And this would have very many legal ramifications. What happens if you buy a car and someone crashes into the car while it's still in the lot? So you sign the contract, you transfer the money, but you didn't drive it yet. Who has to pay for that damage? To who? Would be dependent on this question. And therefore the third one would be to actually be intimate with this in a way that you would not be able to if you did not own it. Now, getting rid of terms like owning and buying, the 3 steps of marriage are: 1, a transfer of monetary value, a ring, a coin. The second, a ketubah, the signing of a document, a contract between the 2 parties. And 3, to actually be living together, which happens either after the chuppah or after the wedding entirely. Now, our rabbis say you can choose one of 3 ways. A couple can decide that, hey, but the problem was that nobody wanted 2 witnesses inside of their bedroom saying, hey, harayat mikudesh li, you are married to me with it. And so the rabbis decided, let's do some kind of ceremony where you do all 3 of them just to be safe, and then you do them in public and all kinds of things that, when we read the Torah, we thought of these 3 things, and the Jewish custom has been to do all 3 things, not just one of the 3 things. And in doing all these 3 things, so listen, it's a wedding. Why not make it nice? You could have a wedding, right? You could do it in your backyard with folding tables and chairs, right?
Yeah.
So why do you rent a hall?
To have more people.
To celebrate.
It's good for the economy.
To celebrate. Well, you could do it, if you need more room, you could do it in a basketball court, right? You can bring more folding tables and chairs. So why do you pay for flowers on the tables? If you would put flowers, if there were no flowers on the tables, what would happen? Would you still be married?
Yes.
Yes. So why did you waste money on the flowers?
So people don't talk.
Okay, so this is the idea.
So people don't talk.
So this is the idea behind customs. Of course, all you have to do is give a ring, or give a contract. But if I'm already doing it, I want to make it a nice ceremony. So I want to have a chuppah that's not just a talit, that's made out of velvet. And I want flowers. Do you have to have flowers in the chuppah? No. What happens if there are no flowers in the chuppah? But that's why these customs develop. The customs are not a bad thing innately. They're meant to enhance something that needs to happen anyways. And therefore we bring a lot of symbolism and all kinds of beauty to the table. The problem is when we get carried away by the symbolism and ignore what actually needs to be happening at the wedding.
But you are considered married even if you didn't go through these steps. If you live together and everybody knows about it.
You're bringing us to a modern definition of modern problems that exist in the world today. This is a big Ramosha Feinstein deal.
But that's a Lusim also, according
What
to
happens with a couple who lives together for 10 years? They were never married, so they have to get divorced when they separate.
Hold on, there is a law in every state. So if you live together, common law, if you live with somebody for more than 6 months in their home, you are considered married. Well, it was in Pennsylvania.
Jewish law, though, would not be dictated by that. But there could be lechuma, some situations where Tamar is mentioning, but I wouldn't get into that here.
I agree.
You don't necessarily need a chuppah. I mean,
No, you don't.
It's definitely preferred, but I think, from what I understand,
Right. The problem is this makes a lot of complications, and it would make for a lot of people who are not actually Jews, and mamzarim, and all kinds of things that I prefer not to go down that road.
no, we don't have.
No, but you're right. There is such a discussion, and I only use it to judge people favorably. Like, oh, they're living together, then they get married. Okay, so according to some opinions, they're considered married. Something to that effect. But it could be a problem. You're right. It is. Do they need a get afterwards? This is what Tamar is bringing up. Henkin, big fight about this.
Really?
Yeah, about this discussion. But Rabbi Henkin said no, right? My heart is with Rabbi Henkin, but I can't say that I disagree with Rabbi Moshe. Let's read one more example. Another legal matter that finds expression in Ashkenazi halachic sources that leads to unique minhagim that do not exist in Sephardic halachic sources is Maseh Goyim, not mimicking the Christian church wedding practices. This is a big deal in Ashkenazi tradition. Throwing rice is something recorded at old Jewish weddings that is not done anymore because the Christians started throwing rice. And that's traditionally part of the Jewish wedding ceremony. But who throws rice? Christians throw rice. We don't throw rice. So what happened is the Jews in Europe got rid of that custom. There's a very big issue in Europe, you find all over the place, not mimicking the non-Jews. I don't know why
There are a lot of things we do, like wearing white. I don't think it was a Jewish.
Okay, so you're bringing up a contradiction. The contradiction is a good question. It's a good question that I don't have an answer to because I'm not so involved in this, not imitating the non-Jews. That's what Tamar's saying. Tamar's saying that you chose the white, but you didn't choose the... I could say that a source for wearing white in a wedding in Jewish tradition would be Tu B'Av, where the ladies wore white when they got married. It could be that it is our tradition. But let's see here. For example, there is a school of halachic authorities in Ashkenaz that forbids making a chuppah in a synagogue sanctuary because it is reminiscent of a church wedding. Look at this page on page 11, the sources, 15. Look how many Ashkenazi sources say that. These are not modern Ashkenazi, these are very old Ashkenazi sources. This led to a substantial amount of literature on the symbolism and meaning of the chuppah, its association with the giving of the Torah, the Mishkan, the Beit Mikdash, creation, the Garden of Eden, as proof texts or proof ideas to support the tradition that the chuppah is best performed outdoors or in a non-sanctuary hall. None of this exists in Sephardic sources. And that's actually Rabbi Vadi Yosef is the one who says this, that there is no Sephardic tradition as such. I don't know if that's open. No. It is difficult to distinguish when Maaseh Goyim is invoked to prohibit the mimicking of church practices and when it is actually influences Jewish law. Grossman, I don't know who Grossman is, the first one, argues that Ashkenazic attitudes towards age appropriateness for marriage and polygamy are two of numerous examples where the Christian cultural background influenced Jewish attitudes in Ashkenaz. 18 and 19, I guess you click there. This leads me to make a humble disclaimer before I proceed. The goal of this essay is simply to bring to light the varying minhagim of wedding ceremony as it is observed today, in the world today. In addition, I will suggest that the tapestry of minhagim reflect a community's attitudes towards marriage, sexuality, and public celebration, while setting the mood and atmosphere of the ceremony. I'm skipping the next paragraph. The amount of material available is daunting, and the way it is used and manipulated can be endless. As my footnotes indicate, I use a limited number of sources that I believe reflect the root of unadulterated contemporary wedding ceremony in Ashkenazic and Sephardic communities today. In footnote 17, he writes something very interesting. He says, I do not consider secondary sources written in the United States or Canada by contemporary rabbis because of the cross-pollination of minhagim that has taken place here. So we have, because we live in communities together, you very rarely find a authentically Sephardic, authentically Ashkenazi, authentically Hasidic tradition, because we're already, and it's not cross, he used a very nice word, it's not cross-contamination, it's cross-pollination. We've been sharing a lot of good things between cultures, and so we have to go back to a generation where we were separate in order to actually figure out, is this a custom of Sephardim or is it a custom of Ashkenazim? You cannot say, oh, well, let's go look, what does the Sephardic community here in University City do? We don't do, because we do all kinds of customs, right? We do all kinds of things. And therefore, we have to go back to a generation where we didn't know each other. And then you'll be able to tell, is it Sephardic? Is it Ashkenazi? Is it European? Is it Eastern European or is it Western European? Is it North African or is it Middle Eastern? All kinds of things that you can only discover when you go back. So B'ezrat Hashem, we'll be doing that for the next class or two. B'ezrat Hashem, the rest of this article. We just touched the tip of the iceberg. But my desire here has been one thing. That as much as I very often come across as, this is the right way to do it, this is the custom to do, it's actually not true. I am passionate about what I do and what I believe, but it's very important to be honest and to be fair that there are other customs, and those customs come from very old places. And maybe not as old as some other ones, but they have good reasons behind them. And for me, if there's a custom, it doesn't contradict the Torah source, or it doesn't contradict the rabbinic source, it just adds some significance. It's your choice to skip it. It's also your choice to incorporate it. There's nothing wrong, nothing inherently wrong with doing something just because it's not written in the Torah, or just because it's not written in the rabbi's books, as long as it's recorded somewhere authentic. Somewhere authentic says this is a good custom. It doesn't contradict what is correct. We could do whatever customs are good, because they all come from holy places. And that should be our attitude. Our attitude, someone asked me today about which nusach people pray, which prayer books they use in this synagogue or that synagogue. I said there are synagogues today in Israel, or Shlomo Aviner's yeshiva, for example, where they don't have a set nusach. They don't have a set prayer book, because they have a yeshiva that has Ashkenazim, Sfaradim, Temanim, all kinds of people there. And so whoever goes up to be the chazan, he chooses the prayer book that he prays with. But what tunes do they pray? They count. Who is the majority in the prayer minyan today? Are there more people who want to pray Sephardic? Are there more people who want to pray Ashkenaz? Are there more people who want to pray Karlach? More people who want to be Yemenite? And so what they do is, you can have a situation where they're praying with an Ashkenazi Siddur, because the Chazan's Ashkenazi, but they want Sephardic tunes, so they're doing Sephardic tunes to Ashkenazi Siddur, or they're doing Karlach tunes to Yemenite Siddur, or something to that effect. And what it means is that every person in that synagogue, in that community, is familiar with every other Jewish tradition that exists. And that is a very special thing. For me, that is the way. There is something nice about having a set, this is what I do. It is nice. I'm not taking away. That's why we have a set Siddur that we use. But the tunes, the feelings, the customs, the culture, it's about time that we start sharing with each other. With Taras in kindergarten, got to share your toys. So, everyone should have a beautiful day.